All right. Well, welcome to the March 16th edition of the Paketo Working Group meeting. Do we have any new faces? I don't think so, looking around. Not that their faces are old, but I don't see any new ones.
Of old faces.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We can start by reviewing the outstanding project level RFCs if there are any. Let's take a look, and I can share my screen. All right, we do have an RFC, and I believe Forrest is also here. Forrest, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I did a little bit on this last week. I can give a quick overview again. Essentially, I think that there's a couple of Buildpacks that are language agnostic, and we've kind of ad hoc referred to as utility Buildpacks. So I'm proposing that we codify that phrase of utility Buildpacks with, by making a group that has, maintainership over a set of Buildpacks that have sort of cross-cutting and sort of language agnostic functionality. Yeah, it's pretty much it. I have a list of proposed Buildpacks. I actually want to add to that list as well. I just saw that the Git Buildpack was accepted into as an RFC. I think I'll add that as a Buildpack I would want to add. I think
you should add Teeny as well. I think that should move out from under Node and be a utility Buildpack since it's not Node specific.
That makes sense. If I wanted to call out the most controversial parts of this RFC, the first part is obviously the list of Buildpacks that I'm saying make up utility Buildpacks. And then the second thing is the last line of the RFC, which is that the current maintainers and contributors for those Buildpacks should become the maintainers and contributors on the new utility team in order to maintain continuity and avoid having to cast for new sets of maintainers and contributors. So those are the most controversial ones, in my opinion.
I just want to call out that it is on the CMB roadmap this year for some of the more generic features that we currently solve with the Buildpack to move into CMB proper. Like the fact that we had to write a Buildpack so that users can add a custom label to the image or add a runtime environment variable, sort of a stopgap. Where in an ideal world, that would just be a feature of the cloud native Buildpacks to begin with. So I definitely think this makes sense to do right now, and things move slowly in CMB, so it might be a while before we can decommission some of these. But eventually you might find this group of utility Buildpacks looking a lot smaller.
I think that there's sets of Buildpacks that we could continue to write that might go into these. I've heard rumblings that people want like a source cleanup Buildpack. I don't know. I saw some discussion about that, and I know that that's something that Google currently has, and I've been toying with for a while. I think the Git Buildpack is a really good example. We have a couple of Buildpacks like ICU. While it's currently only used in .NET, it might make sense to just move it out into this, just in case you need an ICU package, say for some other thing that you're doing. Yeah, I don't know. I agree though. I think it, even if it does shrink, I think that there's stuff that we can continue to put in there to replace it.
Yeah, I think this makes sense regardless, and this is a good idea, and we should do it. I was just calling out the potentially happy news that maybe we could shrink the set of things we maintain in the future.
I think that's always good news. Yeah, I also would be, behind doing this particular refactoring of kind of organizational structure. I think it makes sense to lump these things together so that they can be talked about and thought about more uniformly in terms of their APIs and stuff. And I'm fine with us going with the, the least friction path of just anyone who already is a maintainer or contributor across any of these build packs just kind of gets lumped together into a super team.
I think I'll go in and add Git and Teeny. I'm going to think about, because that seems to make sense. I don't think I will add ICU as it stands currently.
Tim, not that I expect a huge fight, but as a node maintainer, are you okay with moving Teeny to a different build pack group?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there seem to have been concerns about Teeny in general, like in the space of deployment on Kubernetes, for example. So I'm not sure of the utility of it, but it's certainly something I'd be okay with personally, if we find that it's useful somewhere else.
Cool. Okay. Well, it doesn't sound like there's anything to really hash out all that much here other than some minor changes to the list of build packs that are included in this change. I think we can track the issue and get this merged at some point. So then moving on to language specific RFCs.
me again.
Yes, we have this one. This one's a fun one to talk about. The RFC generally is mostly to try to solve a quoting problem with environment variables. Forrest, do you want to give folks the lowdown?
Yeah. So Go supports the use of this flag during compilation, which is -LD flags. It doesn't support it super well, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. Like you can't use LD flags in their native Go flags environment variable. You have to do it purely through the CLI, and it can get a little hairy when we try and allow users to set it in another environment variable, because then you have to do sort of this quote escaping shenanigans, which is possible, but it definitely doesn't look particularly nice. I think it actually makes it harder to understand what's going on and sort of decreases the usability. So I think that I was talking to one of the issue that this brings up was from Jen, I think, and I was like, yeah, this sucks. I mean, the functionality is there, but would it make more sense if you had a dedicated environment variable to set just the LD flags so that it looks sort of like just the argument for LD flags, which itself is not excruciatingly complicated. She said something to the effect of that might be an interesting idea. So I figured I'd write something up and propose it. And this is what I came up with. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I think mostly the discussion has been about what does it look like when folks end up using both these variables, or if the set of things specified in both the variables overlap in weird ways. What is the behavior or precedence of the build pack variables? And I'm not sure if that's been clarified.
Yeah, so I just haven't gotten to clarifying this. I also would like to do some Go testing, and maybe I can save some time by asking someone more knowledgeable about doing actual Go builds than me. Can you specify the same flag multiple times inside the CLI? Like, could you do --LD flag --LD flags, and have two different values in there?
Based on my understanding of how Go flags works, I imagine they're using the standard library flag package. Okay. And in that case, it's just a single, LD flags would be marked as a string argument most likely. And then basically it's last one in wins as it parses the arguments.
Okay, so that's fair. I guess maybe in that case, if I do in my investigation, we could maybe use that to our advantage. but I guess I'm also happy that Emily's here. I haven't had a lot of time to respond to the feedback, but I understand that Java Tool Ops does some stuff where it allows you to set specific part of your Java Tool Ops individually from each other. I think Frankie, you were the one that pointed this out in this comment. So maybe hearing a little bit about that might be illuminating in terms of what you've seen users do in that sort of case.
Yeah, for sure. Java Tool Ops is one of the few environment variables that all the distros of Java understand. It's sort of like a catch-all bucket where you dump everything. So we run into issues where, users might want to set one or two things in there, and then the build packs want to set a couple things. We have to merge those values together. What we typically do is parse the user provided input, and if they've already set anything we were going to set, we don't add our value, and then we just append things.
Okay, so that makes sense. But in no case do you have a user setting one thing and then also setting another thing such that the user is conflicting with themselves. Did that make any sense?
Well, so the example that I brought up for us was specifically like, I know that the Java build packs provide like an environment variable around something about memory or headroom that ends up influencing what the build pack puts in Java tool options. But it's also possible for a user to specify Java tool options. So in the case that someone's using the like headroom environment variable and also specifies Java tool options, how does the Java build pack like reconcile those things? That's, I think, the analogous case here.
That makes sense. So the things like headroom, stuff like that, are inputs to our memory calculator, and the memory calculator will calculate flags that it thinks should be added to Java tool options. And then it will go and add them, but it won't add them if it already finds it in Java tool options. These things aren't directly one-to-one though. Like we're taking like percentages in headroom, and then what gets added to the flags are like specific memory allocation. So there's no place where you could specify the exact same thing in two places. More what you're saying to the calculator is like, here are some heuristics I want you to use when calculating what all the flags should be. And then it will calculate what all the flags should be and then go set any of them that aren't already set by the user. That makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have some precedents for this already, don't we? Though not within the Go build pack. Maybe not exactly user clashing with user, but specified versus non-specified. I believe that your build mode is defaulted unless we detect that there is one given inside the set of flags. Ryan, do you know if that's correct off the top of your head or not?
Yeah, I mean, we have like a set of flags that we choose that's like a relatively like best use case for building like a static binary that will run on like a Linux operating system. And so like that's like the default build command flag set. But like, yeah, so again, the question becomes like, how do these things play together? Like we have the default set and I specify just the LD flags variable. Does that wipe out all of the default values, or is it just append to the default values?
I think it's a similar idea, which is if it is something additional that we have specified like LD flags, then it is made part of the CLI command. And then I guess maybe even if the user specifies it in something like Go build flags and then also specifies LD flags, maybe we should actually clobber what the user specified in the LD flags and their Go build flags to use the more specific set. But I haven't thought that much about that particular side of the whole thing. But I think when it comes to like the user specifies this thing, I mean, as it stands currently in Go build flags, we don't clobber the whole line. If you have anything set, like we look for, did you set did you set a build mode? If you didn't set a build mode, here's a build mode that we know that you can use. So I think that we just go ahead and use the same logic. If there's no build mode already set, then do that and append LD flags.
I guess I would assume that if both were set in the Go build flags and Go build LD flags, we would just use the LD flags from the LD flags environment variable.
I think that's fair.
I think all of this sounds reasonable. I think the expectation, or really what's being asked, is that we define that precedence to explain how all of it works. I think you show some examples of like, here's what the inputs look like, but I don't think you show any examples of like how that influences the command. So like maybe all you need to do is just say like, if you provide this, then here's what the go build command ends up looking like, and like why that is. Like the fact that we chose the LD flags that come from the LD flags variable because of the fact that it has higher precedence than the go build flags variable. If you just outline those things, like I would happily, I just want to make sure that like the folks who go to implement this actually have an understanding of what the behavior should be.
Absolutely. I will, I'll dive in to that and try and sort out some examples.
Awesome. Anything more to mention on this one?
Is it, or it seems like all this conversation has been around like the how, or like what exactly this is going to look like, and not around the do we actually want to add this environment variable at all, which I think was kind of on the table in the RFC itself. I was curious to hear from this group, like, are we convinced that adding this environment variable is really going to remove a lot of friction for Go build pack users?
I'd be interested once we have this put into the build pack, whether or not we can go back and whether or not we should go back and evaluate having go build flags as a flag. I think that would be like a far off thing to remove again. But I feel like, that there's already go flags. And I feel like one of the reasons why we decided to do BP_go build flags, like to have our own build flags environment variable, was because it didn't support LD flags well. But we also felt like, oh, well, we could just like with this, it supports it well enough to do LD flags. And if we're seeing a need just specifically for LD flags, maybe we could go back and reevaluate whether or not we need the whole kit caboodle. But I think that's outside.
I don't think that was the only reason. The other one was that it didn't support inline environment variables. So you can't say through the go build flag set, you can't say like, here's this like value that I want to specify here that's like dynamically read in from an environment variable. Like the Go tooling just doesn't support that. So like you'd still at the very least have to do some like intermediate translation where you like resolve all the environment variables in that environment variable and then pass it on to the Go build tooling, even if you were to like remove like its own flag to begin with.
Yeah. But I'm sorry. I actually think I hijacked your question, Frankie, around that's my bad, around whether or not we actually feel like this is a good thing to do and whether this actually solves a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got some like implicit answers to that if I could try and summarize. So it sounds like when we implemented BP_go build flags, we were addressing a few needs. One was what Ryan was talking about adding sort of environment variable evaluation to the like flags to get passed. And the other was that you can't use the Go tooling's built-in Go flags to specify LD flags well. And so we're like, okay, well, we want Buildpack users to be able to specify LD flags. So let's implement BP Go build flags. And now the UX for LD flags specifically is not very good. And so we like didn't necessarily go all the way to providing a good user experience that like the user experience we set out to. So that is, it's sounding like the explanation for adding this environment variable specifically. Is that like accurate to what you said, or am I extrapolating too much?
I think that sounds about right.
The environment variable point did feel very convincing to me, especially when you think about how that interacts with like the Git build pack we were talking about. Because I know a lot of people would want to use those environment variables, like bake a version into their binary and stuff like that.
All right, I'm just going to say out loud what I heard y'all say from this. What y'all need for the rest of this is maybe another section where it's like sort of given this input, this is what the build output would look like. Just a couple of examples of the various permutations of that to really flesh it out, and then it'll be good to at least discuss again.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool.
Okay. Well, then moving on, there were no more language specific RFCs. We've got a couple other issues here. There is a CA certificates issue topic. Sophie, your name's on the issue.
Yeah, this is not a huge deal. I wrote up a quick RFC for this. Basically, the CA certificates Buildpack always detects, and as we were going through and adding it to different language families, I think we were adding it to Node.js. I noticed that fact that it always detects no matter what, which is actually like good behavior, because as Emily said the other day, that it like allows for users who might not like set CA certificates at build time to like be able to like dynamically add them at runtime. So that's good, but also like it could be confusing for users who know they don't have CA certificates with their app or know they won't want to use them to see the CA certificate logs in the pack build output, and then also having that like helper layer that's involved get brought up just seems a little bit unnecessary. So I wrote up a short RFC that I've since transferred into an issue because Emily and I like thought that maybe it wasn't substantial enough to be an RFC on its own, but I did want to call out that I am looking for feedback if anybody has thoughts about this, since it probably will be something that will be in a lot of our build packs. So yeah, what I have here is just introducing some environment variable to turn off this behavior. Pretty simple. And then Emily and I were kind of going back and forth about what we thought the best name for that environment variable would be to make it clear to the user like what's going on. So the name that I had said, I think, was BP CA certificates. And then Emily suggested maybe BP CA certificates launch helper. If you scroll down to the first comment, yeah, that one. And just looking for feedback if anybody like cares or like has input.
I just want to make sure that I heard this correct. The reason you would set this environment variable is essentially for image minification, or is it for build penalties, or what's the deal? I think I've just missed why you would want to disable this build pack from running.
I would say size and startup time. So it's using the execd functionality, and you pay a tiny cost for every one of those that you run when the app launches. I got some more good validation that this should probably be able to be turned off. recently, where in some case contexts, like people do want to dynamically add certs at runtime, but they want to use like the CA cert injection webhook rather than using our mechanism, which like could totally be a better answer for some people in some situations. So I think we've always known we want to be able to turn it off, but it wasn't our top priority.
Do you think that this would be a good entry point into having it turned off, or do you think we should maybe rethink if the default should just be off?
I think we should start just by making it able to flag off, and then we can go from there.
Cool. Yeah, it's more of something I just wanted to call out and see if anybody had anything they wanted to chat about.
Yeah, I think that it would be worth calling out that we should keep an eye out and see if a lot of recipes come out after this that are all like, and don't forget to disable the CA certs layer. And like, if that's a very common pattern, maybe we want to reevaluate how we're maybe including it or what the behavior is. But I think that y'all have seen more of a use case of wanting it on by default and just being there than wanting it off by default.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. The name is an interesting question. I think in order to understand how to use Buildpack correctly, I don't think we can obscure the idea of a helper layer all the way, because it's not obvious to new users that Buildpacks even have components that can run at launch time. And I worry that without that word in there, people will assume that it means the certs will end up in the final image for launch. I don't know if people have opinions on that. I wonder if we could just communicate more, like if helper is confusing, or the fact that it runs at all is confusing. Like in our logs, we can have a link to the documentation about it and how to turn it off, stuff like that. And then maybe even having it on by default helps more people discover it, but it's easy to turn off, so it's not annoying.
My only contest to the inclusion of helper is that helper feels like a very libpack specific concept in terms of like the helper layer and that sort of thing. And I don't know if that's exactly what you're referring to when you say helper here.
Yeah, the CMB concept is execd, right? I don't know if that means anything to people though.
That's also fair.
Like maybe that should have had a better name as a domain concept in CMB. I find that whenever I actually want to talk about execd, I end up wanting to find a different word or a different name because it's just the name of a directory. It's not a concept that makes sense. It's hard to pluralize. So we went with helper everywhere. We also name those contributions in the BOM helper. So if you went to go like see what version of the CA certs helper was installed in the BOM, that's like what you'd be looking at.
Just on the naming front, like maybe a completely different angle is to not talk about what does the thing, but like the behavior, and like make the name more about the behavior, like enable or disable the behavior. I don't know if that might end up giving you like a slightly more verbose name, but something like, you know, BP allow CA certs addition at launch or something like that. I don't know. It just maybe makes it a little bit clearer what you're enabling or disabling when you talk about the behavior rather than like the thing that does it.
I like that. Maybe something like
Yeah.
enable runtime cert binding.
Yeah, I think that my main concern was just around people maybe not having that full understanding around what a helper is doing or what that means. So yeah, definitely like that idea.
I do wonder if, you know, as Forrest brings up, the term helper is a little bit libpack specific, but I wonder if we want to come up with a term for these components that we use across Paketo, because we use them pretty extensively in Java Buildpacks, and if other language families pull in support for APMs through some of these things. Like you're going to need to use these extensively there as well, because that's how you can parse the binding and use it to configure APMs at runtime. So I do wonder if we want to come up with some standard language and good documentation that like helps people learn about these components, because I think one of the goals for CMB versus old Buildpacks is to be a little bit more transparent and less magic. And I think understanding this concept actually is going to be an important part of people understanding the capabilities of their build.
I would love to do, I guess for lack of a better word, a taxonomy of build packs and sort of a definition of what they are. So sort of what is a meta build pack? What are, implementation build packs? What are the types of implementation build packs that we build? That sort of idea. I really like that idea.
I think that'd be great. And then we could use the same language everywhere. Because I'd like to kill the term meta build pack. Like everyone says it, but it's not really in the spec. I think if we started describing these concepts better in the spec, we might use a different word like multi-build pack.
It's a loaded word you just pulled out there. I don't want to put it back.
Yeah, I definitely agree about some kind of like taxonomy, because I think we as people who write a lot of build packs have developed a lot of like internal. We see a lot of like internal patterns, and I think Sophie's blog post started to hash those out. But I think from talking to you, Sophie, and also like from reading the blog post, it seems like there's certain parts where it's like, we just need a noun for like that series of 4 words that keeps on coming up. So yeah, I would love to see something like that. Is that something that would need to come into existence via an RFC? Does that seem like the right mode for discussing that?
I think it'd be interesting to think about which of these things we'd like to contribute upstream and like better define in the CMB spec. I think there's room there where the community would be really happy for improvements and clarity around language, and like a word for meta build packs that isn't meta build packs in the spec. But then I think we're going to have our own specific concepts, right?
Cool.
So I think in that case, the question still stands. Through what mechanism is it probably the best way for us to do this? Potentially, is this just a strong like thing to do in a discussion, in the feedback?
That
repo?
sounds great.
Cool.
Start there. We can figure out what parts it makes sense to talk about upstream in CNB and what parts are things that are just in our own little area that we can change.
Awesome. Does someone want to take an action item to start that thread?
I can do it.
Oh, cool. I thought it was going to be me for sure for asking.
All right. Anything more specifically about this CA certificates issue?
My only, I guess, first question, it felt like I heard we're going back and forth between, is it going to be off by default and opt in or opt out? Is there, I know the title here shows it opting out, the build pack running. Is that still the consensus?
Yeah, the default is that you opt in. So we're allowing users a way to opt out.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with that. The only like concern that I keep like flipping in my head is like, well, I understand we want to be more transparent. Also don't want to make like a barrier to entry so high with the requirement to have an understanding of a lot of the different ways that a Buildpack can build, an app. And so I think I also feel more comfortable with an opt out and allowing something that may not be as performant or a little bit more magical to be there to maybe reduce the barrier to entry. So yeah, anyways.
Okay. Let's see, moving on. We have another item here, concern builder image bloat, probably addressed by some PR.
Yeah, this is just something that I came across the other day, and so I put it in the agenda and then did a little more looking and found that this may not be a concern. Basically just as we add things like utility build packs and just as we start to support more languages, our builders grow because adding more build packs means adding more layers. And there is a limit on the number of layers that you can reasonably have in an image as far as Docker is concerned. And we've seen recently a couple people bump into that. So yeah, I think this fix to pack will address some of that problem by like reducing duplication. But it is just something, I guess, to still keep in mind going forward. Like right now, we've been thinking about the full builder as just including everything. And I'm not sure how close we are to reaching that upper bound in the full builder. Like how many more build packs can we add before we reach the limit?
Can you
What
not
the
just
limit is
grab
off the
the
top of my
like,
head.
I think it's like 140 or something like that, 142, some weird thing. That's not like something you'd expect, like some power of 2 that would be reasonable. I think there's definitely like, as the ecosystem around Paketo build packs grows and there are like more use cases and more language runtimes we're trying to support, we maybe should broaden what we think of as a builder or collections of builders beyond just like there being like one builder that has like everything in it. But instead maybe like start to kind of separate things into smaller subgroups, collections of things that are commonly used together, but don't necessarily represent everything that's in a Paketo build pack or in the entire, Paketo ecosystem.
If I might maybe propose a controversial idea, is there a reason why we should have a set of default builders instead of maybe great documentation or maybe even tooling that allows users to build builders? Because it seems like at the end of the day, that's probably what a lot of people are going to want to do, which is have builders with only the things that they care about in them. So should we maybe potentially look into abandoning having a supported builder and just having a way for people to more easily generate builders? I mean, thinking about it, you could do a whole slew of ideas, but I'll leave that out for just a second.
I had a couple different thoughts on this. Number one, I do think having a pre-built builder is important for the day one story. Like I think a lot of people might want to make their own builder, but most people don't want to do that when they're getting introduced. And I think a story about progressive complexity is really important. Like people shouldn't have to understand what a builder is more than just pick one to do their first build. And the only reason we make people pick one is because the CMB project can't pick winners, right? Like in an ideal world, you wouldn't really even have to do that. You like learn about the concepts as you go instead of having to learn about them all enough to build something to even try it out. One of the things I've wondered is now with the registry, would it be worth basically shipping empty builders, like builders with no build packs? You can set that as the default and then always use the build pack flag. I feel like that actually might be a better workflow for most people. And then another thing I've been interested in is there's this feature that has experimental support enabled in GGCR. It's called like eStar. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like eStar Z. And it allows for lazy pulling of layers. And I don't think it makes sense to use in the context of app images because we try to keep those small enough that you're usually not putting anything in there that you don't want to pull on start. But I think it makes a ton of sense for builder images because you could just pull whatever build pack you're running. We can still ship an image that has everything for convenience. It's like another way to approach this rather than the empty builder. Or maybe do both for different contexts, like Tecton or platforms that don't have support for dynamic build packs.
I think like you'll probably still run into like, I think the like layer limitation is like a metadata limitation, not necessarily like a content limitation. I think
Yeah.
you're still going to run into that issue if we get, you know, up towards like the top end of the limitation.
The lazy builders do not solve that.
Yeah, I think the
But-
thing that was more interesting to me was like either an empty builder or ones that are catered towards like specific use cases. Like I want to run Go, like we have like a specifically Go catered builder that just wraps the Go build pack. The advantage to like that kind of thing, or like why I think it makes sense in my head, is like users for the most part are already making a determination of what builder they want to use at the beginning, based on like the language runtime they care about and the types of features they care about. Like, oh, I'm targeting Go and I want a really small image, so I'm going to pick tiny over full, even though it's totally available in full as well. So like users already are at the very beginning kind of making that determination. So like I don't see why we couldn't, instead of offering all the language families together in a single builder. Like I guess the question I'm trying to get to the bottom to is, are we really finding that users are in the case of like, I just want to pull a builder, any old builder, and I want it to know how to build my app no matter what that looks like? Or do you think it would be reasonable for users to like say, I know my app is a PHP app, pull the PHP builder?
I think the latter fits more with the users I interact with, like the
Yeah.
Maven and Gradle plugins. You know, they pull base full or tiny in different situations, but they only ever want Java or Java native image, and they're getting a whole bunch of other build packs that come along for the ride, right?
Yeah, and so like you could build bespoke builders for those things, or you could go empty builder with the expectation that they're always going to specify the actual language runtimes they care about. I think the empty builder one is more flexible.
I also think that there might be, I think we could do both. Like we could have an empty builder for generic building, and then we could also have one tailored for each sort of language family or whatever. I also think that there's precedent for doing this with cloud native build packs. I believe that that's what Google does. Google makes, I think, builders for each individual language family. I could be wrong on that, but that was my impression of what they did.
I know we have one in the suggested builders list in Pack, a Google builder, and it is all of the languages, but that doesn't mean they don't also have separate ones.
Yeah, I think they at least have a .NET builder, because somebody was like, the Google .NET builder works for me and yours doesn't. and I don't know, that person, I think ours still doesn't work for them, but it's okay.
Do you worry a touch about the suggested builders in Pack? Because I think a lot of new users get introduced to Paketo that way, and I wonder if they would want us to have 7 in there instead of 1. You know, I don't know how that. I feel like it's a sort of a hack, and now that there's a build pack registry, like maybe you want builders in a registry, and like a hard-coded list of suggested builders that Pack spit out is not a mature solution for the future, but it is what happens right now. And I worry about how if we decompose them, whether we would still be able to be in that list.
So I think part of the problem is that builders conflate the idea of what it means to be a meta build pack or like a multi build pack, and also like a runtime environment configuration of like, here's what the lifecycle should be, here's what the build and run images should be, and then also here's a group ordering that basically represents like what a meta build pack could. Like arguably you should take the builder spec and make it so that it only allows you to specify one build pack, which is a top level build pack. And if you wanted that group ordering, you have to build a meta build pack that is the one that's referenced by your builder. That way, like that kind of stuff is like pushed out of the builder itself. in terms of like what it actually specifies. So then we could get away with being like, okay, here's our top level Paketo builder, which we could make empty. But then that the expectation would be that you have to like include a build pack along with it when you like invoke pack build or whatever.
I had that thought before that we have this order that could just be a build pack, right? Like you basically, a builder could just be an image with a bunch of build packs, one of which is like the entry point build pack or something like that. I wouldn't want to make people have to create one of those to create a builder. It's a bit much. Like maybe you could just make one on the fly for people if they inline everything. I do worry though that the elegance of that breaks down when stack packs land, because you will be able to have like stack build pack order in your builder. And that's not something that you'd be able to have in a meta build pack on purpose, because the stack itself is supposed to bring the stack packs. And there are a couple other things like setting run image locations and stuff that fall a bit outside the purview.
So maybe I'm mishearing this, but it kind of sounds like maybe we want all of the above. We want some builder that has some subset of maybe we say, oh, you know, these are our top 5, 10 most popular languages, and maybe we want some empty builder to allow for just a build packs workflow with just empty builder whateverness. And then maybe we have language specific build packs to support everything else that isn't in our top level thing, but we want to support some sort of attachment of the lifecycle and run environment. Maybe this is another good thing for me to bring up in the discussion board.
I was about to propose that. I'd like to see 2 things. One, if someone can get to the bottom of the current state of how many layers are, say, like full builder, because that's the biggest one. Like, are we even close to hitting whatever the limitation is? Like, get an answer to that. And then, yeah, start a discussion about like what our possible solutions could be.
And these are all sort of like nice end states. To buy ourselves some time, we could do things like squash down the run image to a single layer, start a discussion in CMB about how layers could be combined if the layer limit was hit. Because I think even if we don't want to get into a world where we have that many layers, if we're even getting close, it's probably a problem that should have a solution that doesn't involve us removing layers.
I will take the action item of starting that discussion thread.
Fantastic. Anything else to say on this? Okay. I don't see anything else on the agenda. Is there anything that folks didn't get added to the agenda that they want to bring up now? All right. Well, not hearing anything, I think we'll call it a meeting. See y'all same time next week. Bye.